Soybeans across the nation are hitting a critical point. Growers have an opportunity to influence their crops' yields this season with some timely applications of fungicides and nutritionals. On this episode of FieldLink, we sit down with Helena agronomists, branch managers, and product managers from Virginia, Minnesota, and North Carolina to get the insight on how they are helping their customers maximize their soybean yield this season. As a bonus, Grace Hall and Riley Lansing with the marketing services team sit down with some youngsters that recently attended Camp Helena, which was held in Memphis and hosted by the Helena Products Group. Campers were exposed to chemistry, drone technology, plant science, laboratories, and much more. On this segment, some of those campers will share a few highlights of their experience at Camp Helena and how they now better understand how the food that they eat is grown in a safe and environmentally friendly way. Plus, Jody Lawrence joins us from Nashville with the latest in the commodity updates. Stay tuned for this episode of FieldLink. And welcome back to FieldLink. I'm your host, Bill Smith. And joining us today from the state of Minnesota is agronomist Stephen McKenna. Stephen, welcome to FieldLink.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, you're working as an agronomist in Minnesota. Tell us a little bit about you, Stephen. Where's home? Where'd you grow up? And where'd you go to school?
Well, life has been a long journey. So born and raised way out west in California, but you can cut that from the podcast so I don't get too much judgment. And then I spent the last 10 years before I came to Helena in Colorado, out in the middle of nowhere growing potatoes, where we have, a good time pumping water out of the ground, and eventually moved out here to where rain falls out of the sky every once in a while, and figured I'd give that a try. So I got my undergrad at UC Davis, and I got my master's at Washington State University. So go Aggies and go Cougs, I guess.
Awesome. That's great. And tell us a little bit about your role as an agronomist in Minnesota, and I guess tell us about your geography that you're covering today.
Yeah, so I cover what we refer to as EDAC, which is the Eastern Dakotas. So that's the eastern half of North and South Dakota, all of Minnesota, and then a little bit of northern Iowa gets thrown in there as well. And so that's kind of my geography that I cover. And I'm out of Sioux Falls, so I'm pretty local or central for my location. And yeah, we've had an interesting year, certainly. I've had a lot of conversations that have been very different from the last couple of years. Obviously, our weather patterns have been unique comparatively. So I think, Worthington got an 18-inch rain storm event in one weekend.
Wow.
So it really kind of changed the dynamic of our conversations. We went from touting how good our genetics were last year at handling drought stress to having conversations about does anybody breed for drowning stress. So it really did change this year, and you do your best to make predictions or to try to figure out what the season's going to be like and what you can do now to help later. And frankly, I mean, I was off on a couple of those things. You think you're in for a wetter year and certain things are going to happen, but then it's this wet in the beginning, and you just end up being wrong. So.
Yeah. So Stephen, let's step back a little bit. Let's, a wide geography that you cover in the Eastern Dakotas, Minnesota, and Northern Iowa. Let's talk about spring. How did the planting go for the corn and soybean crop in your market?
It was chaos.
Okay.
So we went from guys being able to get in a little bit early, but it was still pretty cold. And then by the time it was warm enough that we were coaching guys, we were ready to rock. It just started raining. And then it became when could it be dry enough to get out there to plant, to get out there to spread fertilizers. We were chasing herbicides. So our spring was one of those hurry up and wait kind of things. And then the moments you had the ability to, it was a sprint. So it was really hard. And guys did a good job in general of doing the best they could. But as we neared the end, it did get to the point for a lot of locations where it was we just need to get this in.
Right.
And so we do have some fields, of course, that did not get planted into ideal conditions, sidewall compaction, things like that. We did mud it in a couple places. It was the nature of the beast this year.
So we have a lot of variability is what I'm sensing across your marketplace.
Yeah, and we have stuff that's planted early that ended up doing really well, looks really good actually, and we have stuff that got planted late. And then, of course, I mean, after you plant and you get that much rain, you see a lot of goods and bads. So we had a lot of fields that there was a huge amount of variability within the field, and then, of course, between fields, there's huge variability as well. So for the beginning, as you drove around, I mean, yeah, you massive variability within
Mm-hmm.
fields. We had at one point, and just as we reached tassel and some of our earliest planted corn, we had a V9 corn right next to VT corn.
Wow. Wow. A lot of
Yeah.
so let's move forward. We're fast forwarding through the crop season. I know you guys had some decent rains, sometimes really decent rains, and other times, you can get a couple hot weeks too. Uh, Stephen, we're here recording this in the first part of August. As growers across, your market and really across the U.S., I think the theme is we've seen a lot of variability in planting, and we're making some tough decisions right now. Fungicide is an important factor to maximize yield for soybean crops. So, what are you recommending to the growers that you work with in the eastern Dakotas and Minnesota, northern Iowa today?
So we had a tough start, no doubt. And you're right. We have caught some good weather this last couple of weeks to really help us push through. And the recovery that we've had is outstanding. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been able to finally get past those wet feet and get some good crop growth. And our soybeans do look really good. And as we know, August weather plays a big role in determining our final soybean yields. And yeah, I mean, as we reach this point, we're starting to realize and see that we've had the correct conditions for a number of fungal infections to occur, just because we have had enough moisture, and now we're beginning to close canopies. And so we're starting to really see the right conditions to evolve for that fungicide to be a very obviously good play. And a lot of times we're having the conversation about is it a 1 or a 2 fungicide year.
Mm.
Plus we are starting to see bugs as well. And so
Oh,
and we're seeing aphid numbers to the amount that you're going to be out there making a pass anyways. And so if you're already out there, right, I mean, you look at the economics of a fungicide and its percent increase to your yield, and it just becomes an easy thing to add in, especially if you're already going to be out there.
yeah, I think that's a really great point. Clearly, growers are really watching dollars right now. Watching the market, but you've got to have yield, and utilizing a good fungicide program and topping that off if you do have insect pressure, boy, you're really going to minimize your yield. What kind of pressure are you seeing from anticipating, I guess, really right now from a fungal standpoint? I mean, what kind of yield loss could growers broadly expect if they don't take action?
So there's a large study, like it's a metadata analysis that looked at the northern United States and parts of Canada. So that's very much my area, and it looked at soybeans. And if in a average year for the last 13 years, on average, it was a 4% yield increase.
Wow.
And yeah, and that includes a lot of warm, dry years, things like that. And this has not been that. And so if in an average year you would get a 4% bump, which the number actually looks very similar for corn. Um, if you in a normal year you'd get a 4% bump. When you have the right climactic conditions, it really becomes a better investment than that even. And so I know that the market is sensitive. Of course, what soybeans are today is maybe not what they're going to be when you sell them, but also it still pays for itself and then some to be putting out a fungicide at this point. And we of course have a lot of conversations with guys about well, now it's dry or warm, or they don't, and things like that. But fungicides offer more than just a fungal protection. There is always that plant health component to it, and that's kind of a conversation that I think is worth having with growers as well. If you have a group 11, which I talk about fungicides in groups just to keep it
Sure.
kind of broad, and I know there's more specifics,
For
but
sure.
if you have a group 11, so strobilurin, right? If you have a strobilurin in there, it does hormonally change that plant. It does change how long that plant will live, and that's what that plant health component comes from. And it will stretch your season out a little bit. And what I've been talking to guys about is, yes, it will stretch your season out. So it will be higher moisture in corn or soybeans if you put this out, but you do get better yields. And the thing is okay, if you add 10 to 14 days to your season, but you're adding them to the end compared to what 10 to 14 days did this spring. We had, 10 to 14 days did almost nothing in the spring.
Right.
And right now it'll make a huge difference. And so I actually started off the year coaching guys to avoid the group 11s because we had enough moisture that I was worried about cutting and being wet in high moisture situations. But with the weather prediction that we have now, being warm and kind of drier, I actually think it would be better if we could extend our season just a little bit. And the weather forecast that everybody gets is from NOAA, that North Oceanic Atlantic
Mhm.
Institute or whatever. And for at least since last year, they've been saying we're going to have a warm, drier fall. So I feel pretty confident that we're going to have a good weather conditions to finish us out and let us dry our crop how we need to. And so extending the season a little bit, I think, is actually the play. I think that's the right thing to do. So even if we don't get the moisture that people associate with fungal infections, I think a fungicide is still a really good play to pay for itself this year because the way our spring to summer transition went.
Right. Yeah. So timing wise, timing for application, under the scenario that you just laid out, taking advantage of extending, I guess, the performance for the soybean crop. When's the right time to spray?
So North Dakota did a good study on that, and it pretty much, even if you're going to do a two pass, you want to do a late R2, early kind of like R3 for soybeans is the right time, which for a lot of people is either right now or we're a little bit past.
Mhm.
But fungicides are, and this is something I coach people on a lot. Fungicides are armor. They're not as good as medicine. They're much better as armor, and
Okay.
so sitting here and thinking if you should or if you shouldn't actually makes the performance work worse. Going out earlier is always going to be better. And so if you're on the fence about it, but you think, you're feeling it, I would recommend you go out sooner rather than later because that'll have a larger impact on the yield performance of that crop.
Right. And so right now is the time to get really right after applying fungicide to your soybean crop if you're in that R2, R3 stage.
Absolutely. And this is also the timing that, again, we're seeing a lot of other good reasons to be out there. I mean, there's good nutritional passes that we can be making right now. Sulfur, for instance,
Mhm.
with that spring and the weather that you talked about, we are seeing consistent deficiencies in sulfur and zinc in our beans. And so, this is a great time to, do a complete pass of nutritional, of fungicides, and if you need it, an insecticide as well. So, and honestly, this is the time that we see one of the strongest yield responses from a foliar fertility program as well. So really this R2, R3 window that we're in right now is the perfect time to make big impacts to your soybean yield.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point, we can hit this with one shot, cover our fungicide needs. If there is insects present or in anticipating, great time to hit them with that. And then, of course, a nutritional option too to really see that maximize yield, performance
Absolutely.
at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, like you're saying with the economics as they are, it's about efficiency. And if you can do all those things in one pass, you save on application. It's the right play and time to do it. And there's so many reasons to be out in your soybean field. And if you look up economic thresholds for insects, they care about how many aphids you have all the way up to R6. So we actually have a long way to go that we can still be impacting our soybeans yield, right? And so don't think that because we're at R3 or even R4 that things you do don't matter because very much they do. And actually, as we get closer to some of those later reproductive stages, we can see larger impacts on yield from certain things like foliar nutrition. So if you're past R2, R3, don't feel like you're left out.
Right. I think that's a great point. And, one of those nutritional packages that we'll be talking about with some other guests later on in this episode is Fullscale. And growers can see a phenomenal response to their yield by adding Fullscale to their fungicide program.
Yeah, absolutely. It's again, it's one of those things where we have the right proteins out there to encourage the right type of growth that we want this time of year with full scale. And absolutely, it shows off big in beans in particular. And so if somebody is looking for something that boosts their yield to push the crop to the next level, but they're not convinced that a fungicide is the right play for them, full scale is a really excellent play, and it is significantly cheaper than a lot of fungicides are, right? So that is something that we see a lot. If someone's on the fence,
Mm.
we push them towards that and say, hey, this is an excellent product that's going to do great things for you. It's not going to offer that fungal control, but it's still going to improve your yield. So that is definitely something that we like to try to move guys towards if they're not willing to do fungicide, or add it into the fungicide if they are. It's a for price for value. Fullscale in beans is pretty unbeatable. So
Yeah, that's really good insight. So, Stephen, we've talked an awful lot about the importance of a fungicide in the soybean crop. There's still an opportunity, though, for a lot of growers to utilize a fungicide to help out with their corn crop, because there's certainly been a lot of diseases popping up in the corn crop area this year.
yeah, absolutely. With the weather we had to start the season, we were all very concerned about fungal infections. And while we're having a hard time, you don't quite see them yet. We have a lot of crown rot issues. So
Mm,
something like a potassium phosphate that is in either Viathon or Odyssey is actually really helpful for that, by turning on the plant's natural defenses to help manage that. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot we can do to help with those things at this point in the year. The thing that we are seeing cropping up, and we just found some of it over in northern Iowa area. It's not quite on the tar spotter map yet, but what we found is we found tar spot, of course,
okay.
which we found earlier and we have found later. So this is somewhere in between. However, in a year similar, 2 years ago in 2022, we found it in kind of a similar time frame. And we had our AIT is excellent out there, and she put out a bunch of different fungicide trials. And what we were seeing is that if you put out a fungicide when we get tar spot coming in about now, and this depends on the hybrid because some are more and less sensitive, but we were seeing from 12 to 20 bushel increases by
Wow.
using that fungicide on corn. And so, this is that thing where whenever you're in that situation where that's the level of impact you can have, it's really important to be making the right call, regardless of the markets and how that makes you feel. So getting planes out over there, using the right adjuvant to make sure you're getting good coverage, because fungicides require good coverage, and using those to really make sure you're controlling this new kind of high pressure disease will pay for itself and then some, no doubt. And so this is a situation that we have that's evolving, that I think is going to continue to spread in future years. But just because it's new doesn't mean we don't know how to work with it. We know what we need to do at this point to maximize our corn yields as well, and we know it's worth it to put a fungicide out.
Yeah, and I think that's a really awesome point when we talk about tar spot. Yes, it's somewhat new, but we have a lot of experience in managing tar spot in North America. We've seen stretches from Georgia all the way into Canada with this disease, and to your point, when we identify it, we've got some tools in the toolbox to help manage that. And a good fungicide, and something that should never be overlooked, and you touched on it, Stephen, is having the right adjuvant. Don't cut back on the adjuvant, because coverage is absolutely important. Correct?
Absolutely. I mean, you're trying to protect that ear leaf in that corn canopy, because that's where a lot of that photosynthetic material comes from. And getting a product that deep down into your canopy, and ideally deeper, is really important, right? And so you don't want to be having this fight that we see on the horizon, where you're fighting tar spot from the top down and you're fighting nitrogen deficiency from the bottom up. That's not a way to win, right? And so putting out a product like Coron to help with that nitrogen deficiency that we are starting to see, which is
Mhm.
early to be seeing firing up in corn. We don't want that. Plus, that helps with that resinous properties to that help with your fungicide coverage. It is a huge slam dunk right now. So, um, you know, it is definitely something we need to be paying attention to and be working with. But like you said, it is new to a lot of people's areas, but we know what works against it. We are
Right.
familiar with how to solve this problem, and it is about being aggressive and you will be rewarded for that aggression when it comes to controlling tar spot.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely something you need to be visiting with your Helena representative to be sure that you're checking those fields, and utilizing the agri-intelligence platform to help identify issues. And then, of course, visiting with your Helena representative to develop a plan, a solution that's going to be best fit for that field. Stephen, I know you're out there coaching a lot of our sales reps and riding with growers, and uh, let's talk about scouting and timing, using some different agri-intelligence tools. How do growers that are on the fence, what are some good visual ways for them to get out there and make that decision? What are some, I guess, tips and tricks from your perspective?
Well, I mean, so get out there and look at your field, and that's always the most important part. And I would say is that with this variability that we have, you probably have good spots and bad spots in your field. Some of our locations do have the ability, if you're in beans and if you're comfortable with a ground rig going through, you can do variable rate fungicide applications. I have a location nearby that does that. And we have a beta program. I'm not sure if this will make it to the podcast because I don't know if we can say it, but we have the ability to pull in satellite imagery to AI 360.
Okay.
And so we use that NDVI imagery to then make an estimate of the field and say, hey, this is your 75% best part of the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we think you should be investing. And so guys that are on the fence, we can use some of these tools to go out there and, decide, I don't want to spray fungicide on this whole field because there's 25% of it that's washed out and looks terrible. And we have the tools to go out there and only spray the best looking 75%, where you're going to get a bigger ROI for that investment. So that's kind of a tool that we've been using. If you're not part of our AI 360, or if you don't want to, or if you don't have the ability to get that for your field due to cloud cover or something like that, be out there and looking for things. Fungal infections tend to be a little bit lighter color in the middle and darker color around the edge. I mean, they kind of all have a similar looking pattern. The top four, you can look up in any soybean guide to help you out. But if you're seeing speckling that's not from an oil, from like an herbicide application, you're pretty safe to bet that it's going to be either a fungus or a bacteria. And if it is a bacteria, which we have a lot of bacterial blight, or if you have a hail or heavy rain event that damages your leaves, that's a conversation to be having. I had a couple hailed fields this last week. And the knee-jerk reaction is kind of to go out with a fungicide. But those wounds from a heavy rain or wind or hail are opening wounds for bacteria, not fungus. And so we actually see a significantly better response using a product like Orbix or Megafol, where you're actually going to help with that stress response. So that's another thing to keep in mind as we get into the time where the great white combine likes to walk around and hurt our fields.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's a great point, because there's a lot of, weather incidents happening this time of year, especially throughout the Great Plains and in the East Coast. We're seeing a lot of pop-up storms. I know there was a small derecho go through the Omaha area last week, or this week rather, and continuing on through Illinois and even up into the Northeast U.S. So those are great tips, Stephen, to be, sharing and visiting. Growers need to be visiting with their Helena representatives to get out, walk those fields, and make some good agronomic decisions here in the ninth inning. There's still a lot of opportunity to maximize yield. It's about spending the right dollar in the right spot for the right performance, as you just pointed out. In some cases, it might not be a fungicide. It might be, in this hail example, look for a product like an Orbix or a Megafol to best fit that crop's needs. Stephen, I want to thank you for joining us here today on this episode of FieldLink. We really appreciate you sharing some insight on some tips and tricks as we wrap up the performance for soybeans across the country this year.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate you having me on.
And welcome back to FieldLink. I'm your host, Bill Smith. And joining us today are two guys from the East Coast. We have Spencer Moody, who's a branch manager in Warsaw, Virginia, and product manager Brandon Williams out of North Carolina. Guys, welcome to FieldLink.
Hey, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Guys, it's exciting to have you on this episode. Here we are recording in early August. And boy, the crop is getting close to coming to an end, but there's still a lot of opportunities to take, for example, soybeans from really that good to great stage. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the nutritional opportunities and some of those opportunities as we take a look at final sprays with adjuvants and fungicides and how they all kind of play together. But before we get that far, Spencer, let's step back in time a little bit and tell us, first off, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, and then tell us about how's this darn growing season 2024 crop gone for you and your growers in the Warsaw, Virginia area this year.
Sure. So I'm Spencer Moody. Like you said, I'm the branch manager at our Warsaw, Virginia location. I started with Helena in 2010, not long after graduating from Virginia Tech. So I've been doing this about 14 years. I cover a big part of the eastern side of Virginia, basically between I-95 and the Chesapeake Bay. We're primarily in a corn wheat, soybean rotation here. Those are our three primary crops. And yeah, to your point, it's been kind of a wild year here. It's been up and down. We got off to a really great start. Conditions were really good until we got to June, and then in June we had the driest June on record in the state of Virginia as a whole. The corn crop really took it on the chin. It's going to be really spotty, Bill. A lot of the corn is already dented now, but there's going to be places where there's no corn, and there's going to be some places where there's going to be a decent crop. But overall, it's looking pretty tough for corn. But after we got through June, July came around and we started getting some pretty timely rains again. And so the bean crop is looking excellent. That's what we're focusing on now. Our full season beans are anywhere from R1 to R4 right now. We're kind of right in the middle of putting fungicide on these full season beans, and they really do look great. They kind of suffered a little bit in that dry June, but when the rain turned back on, they really did a 180.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, and Spencer, I hear the story, it's been a bit of a roller coaster for growers from across the fruited plains this year, up and down. And Virginia sounds like it was no different than the rest of the country. And you had that dry spell, as you mentioned, in June. As we take a look at soybeans, though, and you're getting ready to apply fungicides, what kind of diseases are you and your team, as you're going out scouting fields, what are you guys finding, and what are you anticipating too as far as disease pressure?
Yeah, so for us, the primary soybean disease that we're going to be watching out for is frog eye leaf spot. That is a really common disease for us, and if you leave that untreated, it can be really damaging. Most estimates are 30% yield loss if that goes untreated. So we'll be watching out for that. Frog eye leaf spot really favors warm, moist conditions. Like I said, we're in Eastern Virginia. It stays humid here. We're getting rain right along now. We got a tropical storm coming this weekend that's
Right.
probably going to dump a bunch of rain on us, and it's ideal conditions for frog eye to show up. So we will treat for that. And aside from frog eye, we found over the years, I mean, soybean fungicide just pays for us. I mean, I don't know of a whole lot of acres around here that don't get sprayed. That's a proven application. We can make our money back more times than not. So that's a
Sure.
very common practice here. Soybean fungicide. It really helps us from a seed quality standpoint too. Guys that are growing seed beans, it helps the quality out. So we really kind of implement that as a standard across most of the bean acres. On double crop beans, later in the summer, we get on up into August towards the 1st of September too. We have a really bad time with corn earworms a lot of years. We end up having
Hmm.
to spray for those anyway. So at that R3 time, and if we're going to be spraying for corn earworms, fungicide's a natural fit there to tank mix with the insecticide.
I think that's a really good point. Yes, we recognize in your area of Virginia where, hey, fungicide's going to pay time in, time out, but you're putting a trip across there. You have an opportunity to look at some other things that go for that ride too. And you just mentioned, hey, we may want to add an insecticide into this tank, especially if we're identifying some pest pressures, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, corn earworms probably the most damaging pest we have in soybeans. So when they show up, we have to treat for them. And I've encouraged all my growers to really focus on the things that we can influence late in the year. Focus on having balanced nutrition for pod fill. The things that we know we need to hone in on: potassium, boron, molybdenum can be a really important thing for nitrogen assimilation and bloom and pod retention. So those are the things that we know we can affect late in the year. And using products like K-Leaf Versa, Coron Metra, Fullscale has been a really, really great addition to the lineup for us the last couple of years. We've seen great results with that. That's a product that has a little molybdenum in it and will also help affect nutrient movement and utilization in the plant to try to really refocus the plant on filling that pod and focusing on reproductive growth. So those are things we can do to influence that yield late in the year. And in a situation like we're in right now, with the corn crop being basically a bust in a lot of places, the bean crop is really our chance to maximize our income on the farm. And with the potential that it has right now, we really can't afford to give up on it. So we've got to do the things that we know we can do to influence that plant and really get it through the finish line.
Yeah, Spencer, I think you great comments as far as this is the opportunity to maximize our yields at this stage of the season, especially for growers in Virginia. And you talked about a product, Fullscale, that can really take that crop from good to great. And I want to bring Brandon Williams in here. And Brandon, he's a Helena product manager. Brandon, you've been working with Fullscale for a handful of years. Pretty, I guess, popular product for you in your market and really across the U.S. Brandon, tell us a little bit about Fullscale and how you like to position and manage that product.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Yeah, Fullscale has definitely been a great product for us over the past, I guess we've been looking at it 4 or 5 years now, and we've played with it on several soybean acres, several other crops as well, but definitely on the soybean acres, we have seen tremendous yield gains out of it. We've put it on some lower production acres, we've put it on some higher production acres, and we're seeing a benefit in both situations there. I think the big thing with that is that soybean is transitioning from the vegetative growth to that reproductive growth. The plant extracts that are in Fullscale is really helping drive those nutrients in that plant. It's helping move the nutrients into the reproductive structures of that plant. So helping increase pod count, helping retain those pods, and helping increase pod count, increase that seed size, and really help drive those nutrients into the harvestable portion of that crop. And like I said, 4 or 5 years now, we've seen great results all across the board from my entire territory, North Carolina, all the way up through Delaware. Have been very positive results. So would highly encourage the use of that, and a perfect tank mix opportunity. Ideal timing for Fullscale is around R3. R2 to R4 is fine. R3 is what we target as the exact timing. But the big thing is that really pairs up nicely with the fungicide passes, the insecticide passes, as a tank mix partner there.
Brandon, you said something pretty powerful there, and we like to think of Fullscale as one of those products that can really, I guess, be a bean buster in a lot of ways and really filling that seed. How does Fullscale go about doing that with some of those plant extracts that you mentioned?
Yeah, so the plant extracts that are in Fullscale, they're really like I said earlier, they're helping drive those nutrients and pull them from the vegetative portion of the plant and really drive those nutrients to where they're needed, and the harvestable portion of the plant in that pod, in that seed, in the seed size. And one of the big things that we've seen with Fullscale, a couple weeks after application, go out, pick a few plants treated versus untreated, really seeing a lot more 4 and even sometimes 5 bean pods, really helping take from those 1 to 2 bean pods and moving into the 3 to 4 bean pods. That's definitely, we know, adding yield at harvest time.
Spencer, you've utilized Fullscale over the handful of years here. How do you recommend growers handling this product? Is it difficult? Is it simple? What's your experience been like?
It's definitely not difficult. Fullscale is a pint to the acre rate, so it's a really easy product to handle. It's really mixable. I haven't found anything yet that presents a problem from a mixing standpoint. So it'll go with just about anything. Just been a really easy product for us to add to the mix so far. And like I said, we've seen great results with it. It's been a great addition to our lineup.
Right. Well, definitely an easy product to handle and manage for sure. And Brandon, Spencer was talking earlier about the importance of this spray, this pass. We've got an adjuvant, should be a part of all of these mixes with the fungicides as well as Fullscale. In your market, what adjuvants are you really focusing on that really pair up nicely with these types of tank mixes?
Yeah, so on the soybean fungicide passes, there's typically 2 different ones we're going with. It may be induced, it may be dynamic. The biggest thing you're looking for with a fungicide application on any crop is coverage, and making sure we're getting a good coverage of that fungicide to really keep that disease at bay. So Induce, it's a free fatty acid product that helps with sticking and helps with coverage as well. So it's going to help stick that fungicide to those leaf surfaces and keep it protected. And then Dynamic, on the other hand, if that may be one that's in your market, is It's a blend of organosilicon and oil. So the organosilicon component is helping with the coverage and increasing the coverage of that fungicide or whatever the tank mix partner is. And then the oil portion is just helping with a little bit of leaf penetration and canopy penetration, getting down below that first layer of foliage to really drive that fungicide where there is less air movement and where more disease is present.
Yeah, I think it's really important for growers as they're taking a look at these tank mixes this year. And, it's no secret. You look at some of the commodity markets, they're not really where we all like them to have. But boy, cutting back on some of these things like a good quality adjuvant could be pretty detrimental as you're going out there. And Spencer, what's the tone? Are growers open to having a good quality adjuvant in their tank mix as they're going with these particular passes at this time of year?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, if you look at what an adjuvant costs in relation to the entire application, it's a pretty small percentage of the overall cost. And if you're going to spend 14, 15, $16 an acre on a good fungicide and maybe a little more on some foliar nutritionals to go with it, spending a little bit extra on a quality adjuvant really isn't that big a deal. And if you're going to make the investment, you want to make sure it's working right for you. So
Yeah, I think that's a really strong point there, Spencer. We're making a strong investment in a quality fungicide, maybe a nutritional in there. Maximize your investment by adding, a little bit more into a quality adjuvant like Induce or Dynamic, as Brandon mentioned there, to extract the full value out of those fungicides. So Brandon Williams, as we're kind of hitting this stage, we've got an opportunity. We're making that pass. We've already decided we're going to pick a really good fungicide. We're going to go in with a nutritional product, probably like a Fullscale and maybe Induce or Dynamic as our adjuvant. There is another opportunity depending upon the crop's needs, and that's addressing some of the nutritional needs. Tell us about some products that you think might be worth considering to add into that tank at that pass.
Yeah, Bill. So Spencer mentioned earlier about K-leaf Versa or Coron Metra. Coron Metra, we do have a formulation that has potash in it, 10% nitrogen, 10% potash. And then K-leaf Versa, as Spencer mentioned, is 0029, so 29% potash. But one of the biggest things is feeding that plant what it needs and what it wants. As those pods are beginning to fill, let's assume Fullscale's in there, we're really driving those nutrients, really increasing the number of beans, the number of pods on that plant. Potash is in huge demand. We typically see with our extractor samples that we take later in the season, all nutritionals will be looking great throughout the season. But when we get that heavy pod load, we start to see the potash starting to lag behind. So one thing I can't encourage enough is if we're going across that acre and making sure we're supplementing some foliar potash in there, whether it be the Coron Metra versions of potash or the K-leaf Versa, but just very important to help supplement that late to the season and really ensure we're filling out those pods and filling out those seed and increasing the quality there.
Brandon, I think that's super great advice. And how you mentioned earlier, extractor. What kind of reports are you guys getting back? And maybe Spencer, you want to jump in here. Are you seeing some deficiencies potentially in these areas in some of your markets?
Well, one thing that I've seen a good bit across my territory is the leachable nutrients. Spencer mentioned earlier we had a very dry June, a very dry late May, and pretty much throughout June here on the East Coast. July rolled around, and it seems in some areas the rain has not quit in certain areas. So we've a lot of the leachable nutrients we are seeing show up on those extractor to leaf tissue samples, low and deficient. So those are things that we're addressing. Nitrogen being a big one, potash being a big one, boron being a big one. Those are the three key ones that I have seen. And all three are very important to finishing off the crop strong.
And Spencer, how about up in Warsaw? Are you picking up any deficiencies from some of your extractor tissue samples?
yeah, like Brandon said, there's a few key ones that We typically see deficiencies on late in the season like this, especially when we get in a wet pattern boron. We on this light sandy land, we just can't hold a lot of boron. It leaches on us terribly. So that's really important for bloom retention and pod set on a bean, and so we kind of have to spoon feed that along, but especially make sure our levels are elevated at that R3 timing. Potassium as well. The peak potash pool is R2 and R3 and a soybean plant. So whatever we can do to try to keep those levels elevated, K-Leaf Versa and Coron Metra 10B are both really, really great ways to drive that potash into the leaf and bring those levels up quick. So those are a couple of things that we try to key in on at this stage.
Well, certainly, as we're at that stage right now at R2, R3, great opportunity to influence those yields by taking a look at the nutritional side of that plant's needs. Brandon, what kind of experience are your growers that you're working with from the East Coast experiencing with products like Induce and Dynamic?
Yeah, so like I'd mentioned earlier, just really, and like Spencer mentioned as well, just really helping get the most effectiveness, the most efficacy out of those fungicide that we are applying, and ensuring that we have the coverage, ensuring the tank mix compatibility. That's one thing with a lot of our adjuvants at Helena is compatibility agents are in those to just help with everything with flow and mixability and such as that. But really just driving that fungicide down below that first layer of foliage and getting down there where there is less air movement, more disease pressure, higher disease presence to ensure we're killing and protecting that soybean crop from disease over the life and activity of the fungicide.
Well, definitely a time of year for growers to really think about adding, a nutritional and a quality fungicide along with a great adjuvant at this stage of the game for soybean growers throughout Virginia as well as other parts of the United States. It's definitely not time to cut back. Guys, is there anything else you want to share with growers as they're kind of turning the page here towards fall? It's getting close, but we still have an opportunity to influence this crop.
Yeah, I would just, Bill, encourage any growers out there to really look at the potential of your bean crop and try to do the things that you can to influence that crop. The potential's there. I mean, at least in our territory it is. And there's just so many benefits to that R3 fungicide application, not just from a disease control standpoint, but plant health and just the overall quality of the plant. I mean, the fungicides today are so much better than they were even 5 years ago. There's a lot of good options out there, and I would just encourage everybody to take a look at what's out there and find the best fit for you, and pair that with the appropriate insecticide and foliar to maximize that application.
Great advice from Spencer Moody in Warsaw, Virginia. Thanks for joining us, Branch Manager. Spencer, thanks for joining us today on this episode of FieldLink, and Brandon Williams, Helena Product Manager out of North Carolina. Guys, I want to thank you both for joining us on this episode of FieldLink.
Appreciate it, Bill.
Thanks for having us, Bill.
This episode is brought to you by Fullscale, helping crops reach their full yield potential with high-quality nutrition at the right time. Contact your Helena representative to learn more about Fullscale and how it can fit into your program this season.
In this week's FieldLink episode, we have a special segment devoted to our first annual Camp Helena, hosted by Grace Hall
and Riley Lansing.
All right, we are joined today with 4 of our campers from the event, and Riley's going to let y'all know a little bit more about Camp Helena.
Yeah, so Camp Helena was an educational experience to get the young minds engaged in agriculture. So we kind of had them for the morning, and so they started off their morning learning about connections to agriculture and how their everyday things that they use are connected to agriculture. And then we weren't able to get out into the field due to the rain here in Tennessee, but we brought the field inside and showed them some cotton, soybeans, and corn. And then we finished off the day with, we headed over to the Innovation Lab, and they tried out some experiments with the chemists over there, and they had a great fun-filled day. So we had some eager campers ready to talk with us today about their experience here at Camp Helena.
All right, today we are joined by 2 of our friends, Liam and Tally. Welcome to the FieldLink podcast.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, well, thank you all for joining. Liam, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So, My name is Liam, and my favorite color is blue. And I also want to be a chemical engineer when I grow up.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
That's pretty cool.
All right. What's your favorite subject in school?
My favorite subject is probably math.
Math. Awesome. Yeah. Well, you definitely need math to be an engineer for sure. All right. Tally, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Tally. My favorite color is like sky blue. And I want to be like what my dad is right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what he is.
Yeah, so
is he works
Tally's dad is a brand manager here at Helena. He manages all of our Coron and nutritional brands. So she wants to take right after her dad's footsteps. And what's your favorite subject in school, Tally?
Reading.
Oh, awesome.
Also lunch. Yeah, that works too.
Lunch is always a good one. All right, so let's talk about our favorite parts of the day. So y'all are here at Camp Helena, and we got to do a ton of different things today. I think we went to the lab. We got to see different crops, some drones, how our everyday life is related to agriculture. So I think we got to do a couple of really cool things. So Liam, tell us about your day and what your favorite part of camp was.
I feel like my day was really fun. There was just a ton of activities that we did. I really liked being at the lab, and we got to do a lot of fun experiments, such as elephant toothpaste.
We saw a lot of like really cool things in the lab that kind of showcased different ways that they could do experiments at home with different chemistry and things like that, which was really cool. I mean, I learned a lot, and I'm 23, so hey, we all learn a lot, right? What did you think your favorite part was, Tally?
I really liked the lab too. The color was really cool. I've been to the other lab. I think that exact color was eye candy there.
Oh, yeah.
I really liked the lab.
So we did a demo with one of our new products, Cohort, that's going to be launched later this year, and the kids got to see the color change from basic pH to more stable pH. So that's the color change that they're referencing. Can y'all tell us a little bit? So one of our brand managers, Tony, came in and was talking about different crops. And do y'all remember what crops he talked about today and which ones y'all got to see and were shown?
Cotton, which we like opened up the cotton thing.
The cotton boll.
Mm-hmm. And also, we saw soybean and wheat. Wait, no, it was corn.
Corn, yeah. And it was sweet corn. So that's the corn that you're able to eat versus the other kind of corn that's used for like ethanol, which is kind of crazy that only like a little bit of the sweet corn is the actual production of all the corn. So that was pretty cool too.
The elephant toothpaste, definitely my favorite experiment.
Yeah, so what Tally's referring to is when we went in the lab today, we got to do a demonstration, and the demo is called Elephant Toothpaste, which, oddly enough, I mean, might actually be toothpaste for an elephant. Do you think that they actually brush elephants' teeth?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think they just named it that for the foaminess of toothpaste.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I
Guys are
agree
probably
with him because I don't think that's edible. Because they told us don't eat it.
Oh, so probably not.
Yeah,
probably
you're
not.
probably right.
Do y'all remember what all you combined to make that elephant toothpaste?
We combined, I know, yeast, water, food coloring.
I think it was like not carbon monoxide. That's bad.
Was it vinegar? Vinegar and then
Vinegar and dish soap.
Yeah, dish soap.
Dish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you mix it all together, and then what did you guys think of Miss Katie and her bringing out the drone and showing us how like the drone is able to detect where there's a bad part in the field and how they're able to use that information to kind of determine what Helena products they should use on it?
That
What did you
was
think?
cool.
Was it cool to see the drone?
Today,
And then did you see how high it went? Because how high did they say the drone could go?
400 feet.
Yeah.
Today, friendly, family-friendly robots and nice robots. Tomorrow, robot apocalypse.
You know, hey, you never know. You never know. But hey, what else were drones used for? So they obviously can take pictures. Do you remember what else they could do with drones?
They can show, is there a disease on this plant? Is there not?
And also, there's it shows like you can put on the specific pesticides for each one too.
Perfect. Yes, you can also spray with drones and how that those products can also be sprayed on. And it's crazy because they can get really big and they can spray just like an airplane, but then they also can get really small and just take pictures. And then what else did they show us? Were you able to see yourself on the camera when she had it hovering over the ground? Wasn't that pretty cool?
That was pretty
Seeing
cool.
yourself. I thought that was pretty cool the first time I saw it. I was like, what the heck? This is amazing. What would be one thing you guys would tell one of your friends that you learned today that you think would be important if they didn't know anything about agriculture? What was the one thing you'd maybe be able to be like, hey, this is something I learned today that I think everyone my age should know about the importance of agriculture?
Most of the things of your daily life are actually agriculture has helped make them.
Yeah, awesome.
And also just like how big of a key role agriculture does in our everyday lives. Like we eat agricultural-based products, and we also like use a lot of materials and stuff that are made through agriculture.
Yeah, and even Mr. Jason showed us how if you're given an apple and then like, what did he say, like 75% is water, and then you take that 1/4 left, that's what we have to like live with, eat, all the things, and then that gets cut into thirds, and you're really only left with a third to really grow everything. So that's why we really got to take care of the land so we're able to have good food and good water and all the good things to make sure we can keep growing and become strong people so you guys can become what you guys dream to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Today, my dad said, here's the slice of like Disney World, Universal Studios, and most of the homes. I ate that slice.
Yep.
Oh,
I've eaten Disney World, Universal Studios,
did,
and
Tally.
maybe even your home.
Yes, you sure did, Tally.
All right, we have a couple more guests from Camp Helena today. We have Christopher and Cooper. Thank you all for joining us.
Cooper. My name is Christopher.
Awesome, Christopher and Cooper. We have a few questions for you. So we asked the last two kiddos these questions. So just to get a little bit more about you guys, what is your favorite color? What is your favorite subject in school? And then what would you want to be right now if you were growing up? Like, what do you want to be right now? What would you want to be when you grow up right now at your current life?
For me, my favorite color is blue. My favorite subject in school is math. And I want to be a professional MLB player.
Awesome. Cool. Christopher, how about you?
My favorite color is blue, and
What's your favorite subject?
my favorite subject is math, and I want to be a professional scientist.
Awesome.
Well, you're going to have to use that math if you're going to be a scientist. Speaking of science, you all got to go tour the lab today. Can y'all tell us a little bit about that, what you learned?
Chemical reactions.
Yeah. What demonstrations did you get to see?
One with like carbon dioxide. Like we had carbon dioxide in a
Blue?
it went into the balloon. I forget a beacon
A beaker.
or beaker.
Yeah.
So they put together baking soda and vinegar, I believe, and it made, I don't know if it was
Carbon
It
dioxide.
made carbon dioxide and it blew up the balloon.
Yes, so that was pretty cool. And then what else did you guys make? Something called was it like elephant toothpaste or something?
Elephant toothpaste.
Yeah, what was cool about that one? What was the reaction of that one? Like when you put it all together, what happened to the reaction?
It was like this hot foam.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was soft. I didn't know humans can brush elephants' teeth.
You know, I didn't know that either. I don't know if that's actually true. I think it was just a joke for the name, but maybe they actually really do use that to brush their teeth.
In the lab, I'm pretty sure someone said that is actually what they do with it.
Oh, I guess.
And I thought that was just the name of it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess we're going to have to find out. We might have to do a little bit more digging on that one.
Yeah.
What about when we were in the conference room and we had the scientist in there and they did the one with the styrofoam cup?
Okay, so like the pH scale or the other one?
The other one.
Okay.
Do you remember that one?
They showed us like this, like how water doesn't do anything to it. I forget what the other
I think it was
liquid was.
It was acetone. So we have a product at Helena Products Group called Fire Zone, and it is an acetone-based product.
Mm-hmm.
So they put the styrofoam cup in just plain water, and it wouldn't seep through, right? But then they ended up mixing the water with the Fire Zone, putting it together, and then they poured it in the cup, and then what happened to the cup?
the bottom opened up and it broke off.
Yes.
And then in the acetone, the entire styrofoam cup just dissolved.
Yeah, and do we remember what that was in relation to? Like, if that was on a crop, what is that related to, the styrofoam?
Like
the leaf surface, right? So it could penetrate the leaf surface and get on the leaf. Okay, so we had Mr. Tony come in and talk about different crops and things that we grow here on campus at Helena Products Group. We unfortunately didn't get to go in the field because of the rain in Tennessee today, but we did get to bring some crops inside to y'all. Can y'all tell us about what crops you saw?
we saw soybean,
And we saw cotton.
Yeah.
corn.
Corn, yeah.
Yeah. No, that was pretty cool. What did Mr. Tony else tell you about? Like, what part of the? Do you guys remember what part of the cotton comes from? What that was called? Yes. There you go. Very good.
What about the corn crop? Do y'all remember what he was talking about when the pollinators? Do you remember what a pollinator is and why pollinators are important?
Yeah, pollinators are like bees and butterflies. And when bees and butterflies pollinate, they help plants and stuff. And he also told us when the stuff doesn't go through the right way, some of the kernels on the cob are missing.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. And do you guys remember what kind of corn? Was it sweet corn or like more traditional corn where you're used for like ethanol? Do you remember if that was a corn you ate or if that was more the corn used for ethanol? I don't know.
I think it was ethanol.
It was sweet corn's the edible corn.
Yes, so it was the sweet corn he pulled out for you guys to check
I
out.
wanted to eat it.
I know. That would be good.
Ethanol corn isn't edible?
The corn that is used for ethanol is a different kind of breed of corn. So you're not able to eat that kind of corn. But you're able to eat sweet corn, yes.
But you're not able to eat it, but is it edible?
It's edible for like cows and pigs, and that's what Tony was talking. He was talking about all the different animals that eat corn and why we have so much corn so we can also feed the animals as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
I have a couple questions for y'all though.
Yeah. Oh, Cooper's putting us in the hot seat time. What is your questions for us?
What is y'all's favorite color? And if, like when y'all were our age, what would y'all have been when y'all grew up?
That's a good one. Yeah, because even Mr. Jason was talking about it's like ag business, what it is and how the importance of it. So yeah, for me, I did not start out in agriculture. I was like, there's no way in heck I'm doing agriculture. But the first answer to your question, my favorite color is
pink?
Probably, no, not pink. It's light blue. And then what I wanted to be at your guys' age, I think at that time I wanted to be either a teacher or a police officer. I don't remember which one it was. But I remember a police officer for sure was in elementary school. But then kind of how I got into agriculture was I grew up with the ag industry with my family being row crop farmers in Iowa. And then my brother went to Iowa State. And then he was like, you should do ag business. And I said, no way. Then I entered for ag companies. And then here I am down in Tennessee with Helena. And I've loved it ever since. So that's kind of how I got to agriculture.
Yeah, and for me, my favorite color is green, and I think I was the same way. I mean, agriculture always seemed like the boys' thing, and I was a tomboy, but not that much, right? But I danced full-time, so I wanted to be a professional dancer, and that was my dream. And then when I got to college, I realized that is not it was not a sustainable future for me. It just takes a lot out of your body. So I was looking at other avenues and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And same as Riley, I grew up in the ag industry. We have a little bit of cattle. We're veggie farmers, a little bit of everything, right? So I knew it was something that was close to my heart, and it's a job where you're you're always going to have a job,
Yep.
right? Like people have to eat, and agriculture is the only way that people are going to eat. So, so I think I just decided freshman year of college that was the path I was going to take, and just studied ag business and ag communications, and then ended up with Helena right out of school. So same way, like I've loved it ever since. The ag industry is so cool, and we love getting to talk to guys like y'all and educate the youth on ag and how important it is, so that in the future you can go back to your classrooms, because y'all start school when, probably next week.
August 8th.
Yeah, August 8th. Yeah, so in a couple of weeks, y'all are going to be back in school, and we want y'all to be advocates for the agriculture industry and tell your friends, like, no, your food doesn't come from the refrigerator. Like, a farmer actually grows that, and there are opportunities in the future. Like, you can be a farmer.
And welcome back to FieldLink. I want to thank Jody Lawrence for joining us from Nashville. Jody, lots of stuff happening in the markets today. The stock market opened up really rough, but commodities had a nice bounce back. Grain's looking okay, better than it has here in the last handful of days. Jody, welcome to FieldLink.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's good to be back. Yeah, today is just one of those crazy days. A lot of people in the industry call them black swan days, because it not necessarily completely unpredictable, just the magnitude of the events that led up to it. Last week, you had some people warning about the tech sector in the U.S., that they were going to be that they were going to be behind expectations when they reported earnings. Then you had a little weaker than expected jobs number on Friday. Then the next thing you know, a 200-point down day in the Dow, and a little bit bigger in the NASDAQ, turned into an avalanche, because over the weekend, Iran promised, I guess, a quick and severe retaliation against Israel for killing the leader of Hamas. So all of that, when the markets opened last night and the rest of the world got to trade this information, everybody got out of everything. And at one point on the open, beans were down 25. China came in and apparently bought about 6 to 8 million bushels of them on the break, which they are really good at buying big breaks like that. So beans finished about 15 cents higher and 25, 30 cents off the lows. Corn bounced back, had a positive day, as did wheat, not to the extent of corn and beans. But I think the biggest thing is you see that we are able to separate ourselves from a lot of the big picture world stuff when you start looking at supply and demand. And certainly China coming in today and buying shows that U.S. is now competitive with all of our bushels, which we've been struggling with the first 7 months out of the year.
Yeah, definitely. And global unrest continues to impact. We got to certainly pay attention to what's going on around the world. And as you pointed out, reports like came out on Friday, jobs reports, all of that truly does impact the commodities. They all play together.
Yeah, because it's such a big global investment scene now. It's not that, okay, it's raining in Iowa, but that moves the market. All that's certainly very important this time of year. But when you look across the spectrum of everything, if we do have escalation in the Middle East, even though crude was lower today with the equity sell-off, you're kind of thinking this is the kind of information, if Iran does go and the price fell to $72 a barrel, OPEC is going to come in and put on some more cuts and want higher prices. So there's some positive things in the raw materials. I think it's going to take a couple days, maybe even a couple weeks, to kind of parse them out. Of today's just kind of, I think one guy I was listening to called it throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because when everything goes down, that's just not a normal day of trade. You can't have every asset class going down. And the nice thing about it is, other than the cattle industry, which is very sensitive to what the equity markets do, the grains and the bean complex held up really, really well. And December corn, again, found a lot of buying and a lot of interest under $4. And, we can call that psychological report. I know it's not a price anybody wants after the past few years, but it would be nice to be able to build a base into the fall at $4 December corn futures.
Yeah, definitely. And that would certainly, help growers make some of those final, push decisions, if you will, to maximize their yield this year. It just points out a day like today is a day where, when you're making those production decisions here in the late stages of soybean production or corn production, it's important to protect that crop and maximize those yields. You got to have the bushels to market them, don't you, Jody?
Yeah, because you can't have a reduced crop at $4 and expect to be even close to any of your break evens or making money. You have to maximize it when the prices are low. That's the cycle that we're in currently. And again, like we talked about when we were in Memphis at the Ag Expo down there, that this is a time when we should be celebrating everything that's being accomplished in the agriculture sector, especially in row crop production. But it's kind of hard when you see the prices lower like this. But it's cyclical. We've been through it before, but today is certainly a great reminder that we can't separate ourselves too far from what happens in the rest of the world.
Yep. It's important to be globally minded and globally aware of what's going on around us as producers, for sure. Jody, let's talk about maybe some tricks and tips that you might want to talk about. You touched on, energy. Boy, harvest is around the corner. What kind of advice can you give producers out there?
Well, for those that are still holding corn and need to clear out their bins, it's just a tough time because the markets over the last up until late last year, had always given us an opportunity for a bounce to sell it a little better, that patience was the king. But right now, I think that raising cash for old crop that you have to get rid of, and look at whoever, get some information about re-ownership strategy, because you certainly don't want to just be dumping it down here with no, low, not necessarily low cost, but with an alternative to say, hey, if we do get a rally, if the corn yield doesn't come in as big as the USDA or everybody thinks it will in next Monday's USDA report, then I want to be a part of that, because if I can get 425, 430 for my corn, it's certainly going to help everything on my bottom line with the extra yields. And one of the things that we're really seeing, and this applies now to new crop, is there's a tremendous amount of carry in the market, which means that the March 25 and July 25 futures are trading significantly higher than the September and December. And I'm talking about corn in this, to a point where the market is paying you more than fair value to hold on to your corn and store it on farm. So for those that can do that, the availability really is, let's try to meet our cash flow needs. Let's make the sales we have to make. Let's make sure, everybody's good and cash flow's right, and all of our, everybody's credit worthy, and we've paid everybody back. But we also want to be paid for building those bins. And when you look out to delivering it of either in March, April, May, sometime in there, you're getting a price that if we do get some appreciation, you'll be able, plus or minus basis, to get back up near the, 450 range, which, from where we sit right now with September corn at 390, that 60 cents looks awfully enticing.
Yeah, it sure does. And you're really only talking, stringing it out about another 5 months in some cases.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do that if everybody minded their cash and over the really good years since COVID, then this is just a downturn a lot of people have been through. But the other part of it is, because I know that interest rates are high and there is some debt out there, that just make sure your banker knows what your plan is, and all of your lenders, because we're really in a position that everybody needs to know. The nice thing about it is, in today's collapse, you had interest rates down to the lowest since the spring, and we know the Fed's going to come in and start cutting rates. So we should see lower, kind of long-term, 3, 5, 10-year loans on those rates coming down. So that's something something that should be a positive moving forward. Are we going to get cheap COVID money again? Not anytime soon, probably never. But it is something to, help just find those pressure points on your bottom line to alleviate as much interest as you can by either lowering your rates or paying off your highest rate stuff, and work through that so that we can, get back to the right cycle, which we know is coming eventually.
I think that's great advice for our growers that are listening out there. Jody, it's all about knowing what your inputs are, knowing what is your strategy, sitting down with your business partners, your advisors, your bankers, having a good plan as we get into harvest 24, which is, Jody, not too far off for a lot of producers across the country.
Now, I've talked to a bunch of people. You start going southwest in Texas, in that direction, that they're getting everything calibrated and they're ready to go out and do some test runs to make sure the equipment's looking right. And if you look at the fat part of the Midwest, we're 6-8 weeks away from everybody really being after it. So we're going from the frying pan into the fire, metaphorically, but fortunately it may be a little bit cooler by then, because I know everybody's tired of this heat this summer.
It's warming up out there for sure. A lot of these crops are in their final stages, their final push. I know on this podcast we're talking a lot about soybeans. Boy, there's an opportunity to really take that, what looks to be a very good crop, from good to great, with some applications. And Jody, listening to you, there might be a few marketing opportunities.
Yeah, I think there are marketing opportunities. They're certainly carrying the market. And the biggest immediate one, whether you want to call it a roadblock or an opportunity, is next Monday, the 12th, USDA August report. USDA touches every column on their balance sheet. They're going to update planted acreage. They're going to update yield. They're going to update ending stocks. They're going to update demand, everything that affects price. And when you look at where we are with below $11 new crop beans and $4 December corn, you are looking at basically all the trade is calculating in that this U.S. corn yield is going to be a record by a long shot in the 182 to 184 area, probably about 183, with beans at 53 or maybe even up to 54. And those are the things right there. If the USDA can kind of jump off the neck of the farmers right now and cut acreage, because one of the more interesting parts of it is going to be, it may not be that they adjust the planted acreage, but there were still 14 million acres unplanted when they put out the June report, the June 30th acreage report, and that's an abnormally large amount. You think about all the rain in Iowa, Minnesota, and the odd and end things that always happen during the end of planting season, that that's where I hope we get about 1 million acre cut, 500,000 to 1 million in both. And if the USDA doesn't just openly embrace these enormous yields everybody is worried about, then we should have an opportunity next week, because at this point, especially this morning after the world equity collapse, there was so much bad news priced in. It's just hard to see what else could go wrong. But Murphy's Law is always out there.
Right. Well, definitely a lot of opportunity. It's a little cloudy in some spots, but boy, opportunity. You just have to seek it out. Jody Lawrence, calling in from Nashville. Jody, I want to thank you for joining us on this episode of FieldLink.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of FieldLink. Remember to ask your Helena representative if Fullscale is right for your crop this season.